Imagine a world where you can't buy more meat because all your transactions are strictly monitored, and it's been decided that you've eaten more than your allotted portion of meat during the given period. You go to your local grocery store, pick up the goods, and as the attendant or automated system tries to ring up your order, they get a notification saying you cannot purchase more meat or else the planet dies. This is the future.
Hey guys, welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Yanasa TV. Over a year ago, while discussing the Farm Bill with Finian Makepeace, you may have heard of his name. He's the executive director of Kiss the Ground. They came out with two really great movies. Kiss the Ground was one of them, and the other one was Common Ground. And the other person I discussed it with was Will Harris. We were talking about the current Farm Bill 2 years ago that still hasn't passed. And that's a really big deal. I don't think people realize how big of a deal it is, but it really limits the amount of investment and risk that people can take in agriculture, in our food supply. The fact that our politicians still can't get it together enough to be able to pass a farm bill after several years is beyond me. But we have ridiculous things in there, like wanting to buy back $500 million worth of farmland because of PFAS chemical contamination. Yeah, we're putting more PFAS out there every day with solar panels and everything else we do. But anyway, as our politicians nickel and dime each other over the Farm Bill and farmers starve, one of the topics that we had talked about was this carbon credit system.
How do you feel programs like carbon banks and carbon credits are impacting the agricultural industry? Do you think they're positive?
I feel like there's, again, we'll call it sex appeal or whatever we want to call it, tech appeal. I think we call it tech appeal, probably makes more sense. But humans are infatuated with this stuff because it's what's in current mind. Somebody's benefiting somewhere across the line to move and be a middle person and like make the wheels and deals. But I feel like the conversation on this topic of climate change has been so bought and sold with like just carbon calculations. The conversations are so linear and non-holistic that anyone who picks it apart should feel like this is stupid. And that's where it's like we've set ourselves up with like climate change, CO2 in the atmosphere is causing everything. You're like, no, the land got broke and it needs to be fixed. And the thing is, we can repair it.
One of the things that scares me to death about all this focus on carbon is some Nobel Peace Prize winner is going to invent a machine that'll pull carbon out of the air and put it on an ingot that we can stack in a warehouse.
Well, Will, it appears as though your worst fears are coming true. But of course, not without some hiccups. So in Wyoming, the Bison Project, not to be confused with our film, the native movie film, the Bison Project is a project that was being planned for Wyoming for direct air carbon capture, so a DAC system. And they were gonna put out these big DAC systems everywhere and capture and sequester carbon into bricks or whatever it is they do, and then they'd store it somewhere. So these big machines suck the air in and take all of the carbon out of it. Sounds like a really bad idea to me, since carbon, we're living in a carbon ecology. Carbon is life, okay? So they're sucking the life out of the air. They're sucking our food out of the air. Our plants require carbon in order to grow. That's why when we talk about the greening of the earth, the great greening is all of that carbon and the plants being able to grow because they have so much carbon in the air to breathe. We breathe in oxygen, which the plants put out. They breathe in carbon. That was probably putting it a little too simple for some people, and I realize that I'll get comments down below, I'm sure. So ironically, the direct-to-air project, the Bison Project, was canceled because there's not enough power for their big, massive machines that are supposed to be offsetting our carbon footprint from all of our energy usage. They're going to use so much power to be able to extract the carbon from the air that they can't compete with the data centers that are going in the area. And these data centers, as I've mentioned before on this channel, are going in across the world, across the United States, and they are sucking up the resources that we currently use for our food supply: water, land, and power. So an interesting tidbit on that is Microsoft, with its transition to artificial intelligence, which is what we need all these data centers for, has increased its carbon footprint by 30%. 30%. So it shouldn't surprise you that Microsoft is one of the largest investors in all of these kooky carbon projects, because they want to get their carbon credits to offset that 30% increase. It's probably going to be a lot more by the time they reach all of their AI goals. It's like, you know, with a normal Google search, you're emitting 0.3 watt hours. Whereas if you use a AI search, it's like 2.9 watt hours. So it's more than 400 or 500% the amount of energy, more than that actually, in order to utilize artificial intelligence in these massive data centers. Nothing that we are doing out there today to reduce our carbon footprint has anything to do with the environment. Everything that we're doing, when they tell you to use less energy, when they tell you to be more, you know, efficient with things, get more efficient appliances, is to make way for the energy needed to create the fourth industrial revolution of artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, there's not going to be enough resources for everybody, which is why they came up with the slogan, "You'll own nothing, but you'll be happy because we'll have you programmed." Anyway, carbon, like I said, is the basis of our ecology. It's our food system. The problem isn't too much carbon. In fact, if anything, the problem would be too little carbon. The problem is that our carbon cycle has been offset in so many different ways. So by grabbing it out of the air and sequestering it, doing it in an unnatural manner, it's just going to accentuate the problem. You know what I mean? As we get in a little deeper to today's video, I want you to think about sequestering carbon. And there's a way that you can sequester carbon by visiting Yanasa Trading Co. Yanasa Trading Co. is a trading company developed by Yanasa TV to promote USA-made products from naturally grown fibers. Most of our t-shirts are 100% cotton made in the USA. We also sell bison wool socks. Buffalo Wool Company is a company based in Texas. The Buffalo Wool Company collects down fibers from bison hides and blends them into fabrics. You can literally wear these socks for days. I have. We've gone hiking in our socks. Our youngest has a pair of the Red Dog socks, and we've worn them for a couple days in a row, and our feet don't stink because the socks themselves don't create the bacteria or the environment to create all that stinkiness. In fact, I did a video on here not too long ago where I had gone out and hiked 20 miles, took my dirty socks, took a big whiff out of them. They still smelled like bison wool. 20 miles, haven't washed these yet. They still smell like they're new out of the package. The best part is by buying bison wool products, you are adding value to our American ranchers raising bison and restoring native prairies and grasslands. That's how you can sequester carbon naturally. It's by buying these products, supporting the ranchers that are investing in having these animals back into our environment and out on the rangelands. So over the past month or so, you've heard me talk a lot about these big green energy movements where they have these transmission lines going across the United States and they're taking up farmland. There's been a lot of eminent domain cases. It's really sad. And then now I did a video the other day talking about how BLM is going to be taking land that has been traditionally used for grazing leases and turning it into solar fields to feed this massive power grid. But those aren't the only land grabs that are going on right now. If you live in Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, or Minnesota, you've probably heard a lot of talk about carbon pipelines. Wyoming's a new one on that list. If you haven't been paying attention, there's about a 400-mile-long natural gas line that they're wanting to convert into one of these carbon pipelines to pipe carbon and sequester it under the ground. Is this a good idea? Environmentally speaking and sustainability speaking, I think it's a nutty idea. But there are some people who think it's a perfectly good idea and a perfectly safe idea. Economically speaking, due to the Inflation Reduction Act, it could yield some serious benefits to large corporations, maybe not you and I. And the way they get these benefits is by piping this carbon through this carbon pipeline and sequestering it under the private lands of farmers in North Dakota who don't want it there. I don't blame them, personally. You should listen to this. Carbon dioxide is classified as a hazardous material by the federal government. It is commonly used as euthanizing agent for livestock, and there are reported deaths from industrial CO2 leaks every year. these pipelines will have liquidized CO2, highly pressurized around 2,000 psi, and any natural or mechanical accident could cause a significant rupture, releasing an enormous cloud of CO2 over the surrounding landscape. There has already been significant failures of these systems, resulting in highly dangerous ruptures. For the residents of Sataria, Mississippi, this meant being gassed and poisoned in their own homes and communities. What is that movie with Brad Pitt? Is it that horrible movie that you watched once and were discussed, Sevens, the Seven Deadly Sins, when the kid's like, I see dead people? Or am I getting my movies confused? In any case, that's what I see when I see these gas pipelines going in. I mean, think about it. Together, CO2 and water from carbonic acid can leach toxic metals out of rocks. CO2 seeping into water supplies from deep underground has shown to make water dangerous to drink. With these pipelines slated to cross so many waterways, there should be a serious concern to both people and animals about putting these pipelines in. So just like what we've been seeing with the power lines and these data centers taking water and taking people's land to be able to put in water inlets and truck water across counties, we're seeing a lot of eminent domain clashes coming up over these carbon sequestering pipelines. So they're going to sequester carbon, pipe it underneath the ground and store it under some farmer's land in North Dakota that doesn't want it. The state of Iowa has recently ruled that the Summit pipeline can use eminent domain in certain circumstances to be able to acquire land for their pipeline system. The South Dakota Supreme Court recently ruled that they couldn't use eminent domain. In South Dakota's ruling, they determined that the pipeline didn't benefit the public, and it really doesn't if you think about it. They've tried to sell it that it would benefit the farmers, like the corn farmers, because then the ethanol plants would become carbon neutral and be more competitive in the global marketplace. But the actual monetary benefits to corn farmers are very small. And like I've said in previous videos, this green energy movement is about creating more energy. It's not necessarily about doing away with fossil fuels. So I don't think that that farmers growing corn for ethanol are going to face anything in the near future that would say, we're not going to buy your product anymore unless you're piping your CO2 byproducts under the ground. The only ones, ironically, who really benefit from piping all of this CO2 into these cavities under the ground are the big oil and gas companies. As it turns out, a minor side effect of pumping liquid carbon into the ground is that it fills and pushes cavities where oil is hard to extract and pushes that oil out for fracking. Carbon capture and storage, CCS technology, pretends to support climate change mitigation by reducing carbon emissions, but its true intent is to further entrench existing energy systems by creating a cheap, subsidized source of CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. And like I said, everything that you've been seeing and hearing with the Summit pipeline is about to happen in Wyoming again. And a lot of people get confused by this. They think that this is just, a Biden administration move, a left-winger move. But if you look at the Summit pipeline situation, and you look at both of these pipelines that are going into Wyoming and all these other western states, they are backed by a lot of those Republican governors. They are backed by a lot of Republicans. Summit Pipeline is one of the largest contributors to Republican officials in those states. So they have these people in their pockets because they're donating millions of dollars to their campaigns. That being said, yes, it was a Democrat bill that provided this opportunity to everybody. But don't be fooled by thinking this is like a one party over the other party thing. Both parties are playing a hand here. And there's a lot of money to be made because of the Inflation Reduction Act. What does the Inflation Reduction Act have anything to do with carbon pipelines or sequestering carbon? I don't know, maybe we're trying to curb the inflation of carbon, right? But we came out with this law that offered significant tax credits to people to sequester carbon. And in a sense, the entire law was trying to start monetizing carbon to turn it into some sort of commodity. And I think that's where one of the South Dakota's rulings was, hey, this isn't a commodity that we're shipping to people. But the objective of paying companies to sequester carbon is to monetize carbon in and of itself. And there are actually websites you can go to where people can test their theories of law against a website to see how much carbon could be sequestered, how much value it could add to the system. And you'll see that there are these laws and bills that have been introduced all around the world that are slowly monetizing carbon. So there's a lot of money to be made here. According to the think tank Resources for the Future, a carbon price is a climate policy approach that works by charging emitters for the tons of carbon dioxide for which they are responsible. A number of countries and subnational jurisdictions like US regions or states use this policy to reduce emissions. Think about what it's saying there. It's charging the emitters for the tons of carbon for which they are responsible. And it's paying those who are sequestering. There's a positive and there's a negative balance there. Cap and invest and carbon tax are just examples of carbon pricing. S&P Global describes trading the carbon pricing marketplace as an increasingly popular mechanism to harness market forces to address climate change by creating financial incentives for companies and countries to lower their emissions. We're the carbon emitters, guys. They are literally building out an infrastructure and a way of tracking everything you do, understanding everything about your life. That way they can compute to some degree of certainty what your carbon footprint is. Eventually, we're all going to be paying into this carbon emitting tax that's then going to benefit large corporations and global institutions, global governments who are doing all these things to sequester the carbon. These are things that I've been warning about on this channel for some time. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. But what we're seeing is this monetization of natural elements, natural carbon, all these things. I don't know if you guys heard this podcast, but listen to this real quick.
They have essentially said that this is the only way, this will be the only way to prove you have legal identity. And so if you don't participate in that system as far as the state or the private sector is concerned, you don't exist. So by not participating in that system, you're inherently excluded from the economic system and really essentially everything. It's going to be a problem, reaction, solution type of situation where they've already made the solution. They've already developed what they want to be the new financial governance system after this new Bretton Woods moment. They just need some sort of big event on the scale of World War II or some large event that's equally disruptive in order to be like, all right, now it's time for a new financial governance system.
About a year ago, while speaking at the Global Finance Summit in Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron said the world needs a public financial shock to fight global warming. Around the same time, World Economic Forum founder and executive chairman Klaus Schwab also made a similar statement about revamping the global economy. In his words, every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry, from oil and gas to tech, must be transformed. We need a great reset of capitalism. According to popular investigative journalist Whitney Webb, what we are witnessing is the birth of a new international monetary system, a replacement for the current Bretton Woods system built solely on the blockchain to aid the complete surveillance and censorship of every aspect of our lives. The UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance, who said the three pillars of the New World Order are digital IDs, CBDCs, and ESG. Whitney warns that all world governments are pushing this New World Order agenda. From forests to rivers, mountains, and lakes, everything will soon become a commodity, owned and traded by the super rich and powerful.
In this context, I think the digital ID is a key enabler of the surveillance, knowing what everyone is doing at the transactional level and being able to tweak that micromanagement based on a person's activity, because the digital ID isn't just limited to the financial system, right? It's like your travel, your health history, your career history, your education credentials, your access to telecommunications, social media, the internet. With the new AI era, right, they can fuse all that data, analyze it, and depending on how they develop that AI algorithm, use it to control people really in unprecedented ways. If you don't participate in that system as far as the state or the private sector is concerned, you don't exist.
How does this system get triggered? How do we move into the Mark Carney-ism?
Well, I think they sort of give it away when they say that this is the new Bretton Woods movement that needs to be seized. So Bretton Woods was what came out of World War II, essentially, and was the creation of a new financial governance system after World War II. And this is essentially an effort to create a new financial governance system that was announced well before any sort of crisis like that, but it's probably going to need a crisis of that level to be implemented and to convince people to onboard at scale. And if you subscribe to the theory that all wars are bankers' wars, which there is plenty of evidence to support that, I would say, that seems to suggest that perhaps, this is the it's going to be a problem reaction solution type of situation where they've already made the solution. They've already developed what they want to be the new financial governance system after this new Bretton Woods moment. They just need some sort of big event on the scale of World War II or some large event that's, equally disruptive in order to be like, all right, now it's time for a new financial governance system after this big event like they did after World War II.
Imagine a world where you can't buy more meat because all your transactions are strictly monitored, and it's been decided that you've eaten more than your allotted portion of meat during the given period. You go to your local grocery store, pick up the goods, and as the attendant or automated system tries to ring up your order, they get a notification saying you cannot purchase more meat or else the planet dies. This is the future Whitney and Mark are warning us about.
But this is all happening in real time, guys. You're actually seeing on a daily basis the government stepping in with these large private institutions to take people's land, to take up our farmland, to take up our ranch land, to build this infrastructure, this system, this belief system, belief of value, of monetization of carbon. And as they roll it out, which will be over a very short period of time, this is one of the fastest moving revolutions that I've ever seen. We're all going to be the ones that are sitting there one day going, oh, crud, we've switched to this new system and they've already sequestered so much of it, they're rich. And now we have to pay them for it. I'm sure it will just be like something like 10 cents a gallon in your gas or something like that. But it adds up, right? These companies are going to get richer and wealthier off of us for simply living a life. Anyway, guys, that's just something to think about. I've been thinking about this stuff a lot lately, and it bothers me that this is the direction that we've chosen to go. Anyway, guys, until next time, stay safe.